I'm Alex. I'm 28 years old. I work in IT, and I've been paying my parents' mortgage in secret for the past 3 years. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. And the day my dad decided to humiliate me in front of the entire family, calling me a freeloader who never contributes, was the day I finally lost my patience. But before I get to that moment, the sip, the receipts, the silence, I need to take you back to how this all began. Because, truthfully, this isn't a story about one insult at dinner. It's a story about a lifetime of being overlooked, underestimated, and used. And now, it's finally time to talk about it. Growing up, my brother, Jason, was the golden child. 3 years older than me, straight A's, star athlete, and the kind of smooth-talking confidence that made people believe he was destined for greatness. He could charm a brick wall into smiling. My parents, especially my dad, saw him as the future, the legacy, the one who would make them proud. I wasn't a bad kid. I was quieter, more introverted, the kind who got lost in books and preferred computers to crowds. But to my family, especially in comparison to Jason, I was invisible. Jason got the biggest portions at dinner. Jason got the loudest cheers at his games. Jason got a brand new car at 17. When I turned 17, I got Jason's old hand-me-down Civic with a cracked side mirror and no working AC. It still runs, Dad said with a shrug when I looked disappointed. Be grateful your brother took care of it. My mom wasn't as openly dismissive, but she followed Dad's lead. She'd make excuses for them. Your brother just needs more support right now, or they don't mean it like that, Alex. But silence isn't neutral. Over time, it becomes a weapon. And I learned to keep my mouth shut and my head down, figuring that one day, I'd be out of that house, and it would all be behind me. I went to a state university on scholarship, lived off ramen and night shifts at the campus IT help desk. Meanwhile, Jason dropped out after 2 semesters, said college wasn't for him. My parents still praised him for knowing what he wanted. He bounced around a few entry-level sales jobs before settling into real estate, thanks to a family friend who saw his potential. The commissions were inconsistent, but the job titles sounded impressive, and that was enough for Dad to keep bragging to relatives about Jason killing it in the market. I graduated with honors and landed a job at a cybersecurity firm right out of school. It was a quiet job, no flashy suit, no business cards, but I liked it. Steady income, full benefits, and most importantly, peace. For the first time, I could breathe. I moved into a small apartment across town, started saving, and finally began building a life that felt like mine. I barely saw my family for the first couple years after graduation. They didn't really ask. I didn't really offer. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening, and I'd just gotten back from the gym when Mom called, her voice trembling. Alex, we're in trouble. The bank called today. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. I didn't know. It's been your father handling it, and he kept telling me it was fine. But now they're threatening foreclosure. I remember standing in my tiny kitchen, staring at the peeling linoleum floor as I listened to her try to hold back tears. My first instinct wasn't anger. It was panic. That house wasn't just wood and drywall. It was where I grew up, where my childhood lived. The thought of it being taken away sent a chill through my spine. How much? I asked, already opening my banking app. How far behind are you? She hesitated. Altogether, we're short about $8,000. I could have said no. I should have said no. But I wired the money that night. I told her to have the bank send all future mortgage statements to me. I didn't even ask why they were in trouble. I just acted. I thought it was a one-time thing. Just a momentary crisis. But 1 month turned into 3, then 6, and before I realized what I'd agreed to, I was covering the entire mortgage every month. Quietly. Automatically. Without a word of thanks from my dad. See, that was the deal. He never acknowledged it. Never looked me in the eye. Never said, thank you for saving our home. In fact, in his mind, it was Jason who was holding the family together. Because Jason brought them groceries every now and then. Because Jason mowed the lawn on Sundays. Because Jason showed up. And me? I was just the weird IT guy who hid behind screens and never offered help. He once joked to my face that I probably had robot money stashed away in Bitcoin, and the family laughed. I laughed too. It was easier than correcting him. I didn't tell anyone about the mortgage. Not my friends. Not even my girlfriend at the time. I just kept paying it. Month after month, year after year. And every time I visited, My dad would toss jabs my way like darts at a target. Jason fixed the sink last week. Good to have someone around who actually knows what he's doing. Or, not everyone can sit in front of a computer and call it work. The worst part wasn't the insults. It was the way everyone let them slide. My mom would wince, but never defend me. Jason would smirk or change the subject. I was a guest in a home I paid for, treated like an afterthought. And then came that dinner. It was a casual Sunday dinner, just the four of us. Jason had some good news to share. He always did. He'd closed a sale on a new condo downtown, and my parents were practically glowing. "That's our boy," Dad said, clapping him on the back. "You've really made something of yourself. Makes me proud." I was halfway through chewing when he turned to me and said it. "You could learn a thing or two from your brother. He actually contributes. Not like some people, huh?" I stopped mid-bite. My hands went cold. I looked up and saw Jason smirking behind his wine glass, eyes dancing with amusement. Mom didn't say anything, just kept her eyes on her plate. And in that moment, something inside me snapped, not in a loud, explosive way, but quiet. Final, like the sound of a door closing. I swallowed my bite, took a sip of water, set my glass down slowly. Then I said, "Cool. Then he can handle the mortgage from now on." That got their attention. Dad frowned. "What mortgage?" Mom looked up, confused. "What do you mean, Alex?" I didn't speak right away. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I'd brought with me. I'd never planned to use it. I didn't even know why I printed the statements. Maybe a part of me had always known this day would come. I laid the folder on the table and flipped it open. Inside, 3 years' worth of mortgage payments, bank transfers, confirmation emails, every receipt, every cent, every month. I didn't say a word. I just let the silence do the talking. And right then, right there, everything changed. The silence after I laid the receipts on the table wasn't the kind that fills a room. It was the kind that empties one. Like the air had been sucked out and everyone was waiting to see who would speak first. Like some invisible jury had been handed a verdict and no one wanted to read it aloud. My mom stared at the folder like it had fangs. Jason blinked. Just once. But even that small flicker of his usual confidence faded fast. And my dad? My dad's mouth tightened into a line so thin it looked like it might vanish. I didn't say anything. Not at first. I just leaned back in my chair and waited. Mom finally reached out, hesitating, her fingers trembling as she pulled one of the pages closer to read it. It was an automated email from my bank confirming a mortgage payment, dated 2 years ago. Then another one. And another. Page after page, statement after statement. The folder was thick for a reason. She looked up at me. "Alex, why didn't you say anything?" That question hit me harder than I expected. Why didn't I say anything? Because I knew they wouldn't believe me? Because I didn't want to make Jason look bad? Because I thought, maybe if I just kept helping, things would change? I wasn't sure anymore. "I don't know," I said quietly. Maybe I was waiting to be treated like I mattered first. My dad scoffed. It was subtle, but I caught it. A little exhale of disbelief, like I'd just told him I deserved a trophy for showing up. "Oh, come on," he said, voice heavy with disdain. "You act like you've been carrying this whole family." I didn't flinch. I paid for this house. For 3 years. While Jason was selling condos and bringing over bags of groceries to play the hero. Jason sat up straighter. "I didn't know you were covering the mortgage," he said, a little too quickly. I raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "Because Mom said you were handling it." I thought you just meant you helped one time," he muttered. "She didn't tell me you were doing it monthly." I turned to Mom. "Is that true?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. And that's when it started unraveling. Turns out, Dad had told her not to worry about the mortgage. That he had a plan to catch up. He'd convinced her it was temporary. That some new clients were about to sign. That a big windfall was coming any day now. But that day never came. When the bank threatened foreclosure, they panicked. They called me. They never told Jason. And they never told me how deep the hole really was. I found that out myself. How Dad had quietly refinanced the house 5 years ago, pulling out equity to fund a business opportunity that went nowhere. He never told anyone about the balloon payments, the penalties, the missed months. Not until it was almost too late. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck as the weight of it hit me all over again. I'd saved them, quietly, without fanfare, and still, they made me feel like I was the one falling short. "I'm not mad about the money," I said, voice tight. "I'm mad that you still think I'm the one who doesn't contribute." My dad stood up suddenly. pushed his chair back with a screech that cut through the tension like a blade. You always think you're the victim, he barked. But you wouldn't even be where you are if it weren't for this family. We gave you everything. I actually laughed. You gave Jason everything. I got his leftovers. And then you acted like I owed you for them. He pointed a finger at me. You always resented your brother. I stood now too. No. I tried to be like him. For years. But you only ever had room for one of us to be worth something. And when I stopped trying, when I started building my own life, you didn't even notice. Jason's voice cut in, trying to sound calm. Look, can we not do this here? It's dinner. No, I snapped. Let's finally do this. Right here. Right now. The room spun with tension. My mom looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. My dad's eyes burned with anger. Jason looked like a deer in headlights. Like the golden glow around him was starting to dim, and he wasn't sure how to react without it. But I wasn't finished. You think I'm selfish because I keep to myself? I said, voice shaking but steady. But I've spent years cleaning up after your decisions. Quietly. Without asking for anything. And I'm done. What's that supposed to mean? Mom whispered. It means the next payment's due in 2 weeks. Jason can handle it. Since he actually contributes. Jason paled. Alex, wait. Let's talk about this. No, I said. You've had years to talk. I picked up my keys and walked toward the door. You're punishing your own family, my dad growled. Over what? A comment? I turned around in the doorway, looked him square in the eye. It wasn't the comment. It was the last straw. I left without another word. But it didn't end there. That dinner lit a fuse I didn't even realize I'd been carrying for years. And what came next, what they did to me after I walked out, wasn't just disappointing. It was betrayal in its purest form. A few days later, my phone started blowing up. Not with apologies. Not with attempts to make things right. But with angry texts from extended family. Uncles, aunts, even my godmother, scolding me for abandoning my parents, for leaving them in the lurch, for turning my back on my brother. Apparently, my dad and Jason had already started spinning their version of the story. According to them, I'd lashed out, embarrassed everyone, and threatened to ruin the family over a misunderstanding. That I'd been secretly keeping receipts to throw in their face. That I'd always been jealous. Not one mention of the payments. Not one word about the house I'd saved. I couldn't believe it. After everything, they still found a way to paint me as the villain. And here's where things really took a turn. A week later, I got an email from the bank. An alert that the auto payment on the mortgage had been re-enabled from my account. Without my permission. I stared at the screen, heart racing. I'd canceled the auto payment manually after dinner. Logged in, removed my card, and double-checked it twice. And now, somehow, it was back on. I called the bank immediately. After an hour on the phone, I finally got through to someone who confirmed it had been reactivated using credentials that matched my login, but not from my usual device. Someone had accessed my account. Someone in that house. My hands were shaking as I changed every password I had. I set up two-factor authentication on everything. I even went into my old email accounts and cleared out anything that might have given them a breadcrumb. But the damage had been done. And that's when I knew this wasn't just about disrespect anymore. It was war. And I was done playing nice. The morning after I discovered the unauthorized mortgage payment, I sat alone in my apartment, hunched over my kitchen table with my laptop open and my phone buzzing nonstop beside me. Messages poured in like a slow leak from a cracked ceiling. Drip, drip, drip. Each one more infuriating than the last. Some were guilt trips from my mom. Others were guilt-laced digs from distant relatives who had no clue what had actually happened. A few were outright venomous. Family doesn't abandon each other over a little mistake. Your dad's not perfect, but he's still your father. Jason said you threatened to stop paying as some kind of power move. Is that true? I didn't respond to a single one. I just watched them pile up until my screen blurred with notifications. For the first time in my life, I blocked my parents' numbers. Then Jason's. Then every cousin, aunt, and uncle who decided they had the moral high ground without ever asking me what really happened. I thought it would feel dramatic or even cruel, but instead, it just felt quiet. Like someone finally turned off the faucet that had been dripping poison into my head for years. But even as the messages stopped, the weight didn't lift. That first week, I barely slept. I'd stare at the ceiling for hours, my chest heavy, my thoughts racing. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was deeply personal. They hadn't just crossed a line by accessing my bank account. They'd rewritten the narrative of who I was. And they were good at it. So good that people believed them without question. There was a moment, on the fifth night, around 3 a.m., where I caught myself wondering if maybe they were right. Maybe I was selfish for cutting them off. Maybe I was making a mountain out of a molehill. Maybe I had no right to be this angry. But then I reminded myself of the years I spent quietly carrying the weight of a house that wasn't mine. Of the Christmases where Jason got new gadgets and I got gift cards. Of the way Dad looked through me like I was wallpaper. Of how my accomplishments were met with lukewarm smiles and quick subject changes. Of how even now, especially now, they were more concerned with their reputation than with the truth. I realized something important that night. I wasn't angry because they used me. I was angry because they never saw me at all. And once I understood that, I stopped trying to be seen. I decided to rebuild. The first step was simple: control. I needed to know exactly where I stood. So I combed through every one of my accounts: banking, investments, subscriptions, everything. I made spreadsheets. I categorized every cent. What I found wasn't pretty. Between the mortgage payments and emergency wires I'd sent over the years, I'd spent nearly $80,000 on my parents without ever thinking twice. It stunned me, not because of the number itself, but because it had never even occurred to me to add it up before. I'd been so conditioned to step in quietly, to patch over holes without making noise, that I didn't even realize how much of myself I'd given away in the process. So I set a new rule: no more invisible giving. From now on, anything I gave, money, time, energy, had to come from choice, not guilt. It had to feel like mine. The second step was deeper. Therapy. I'd never done it before. Growing up in our family, therapy was a dirty word. Something for weak people. Something we didn't need because we handle our business in-house. But I was tired of handling things alone. I found a local therapist who specialized in adult family estrangement, and I booked a session. At first, I was skeptical. I sat on the couch with my arms crossed, telling myself it was a waste of time. But something cracked open during that first session, just a little, and I kept going back. Week after week, I unpacked the layers I'd buried for years. The small humiliations, the comparisons, the loneliness. I admitted things out loud I'd never said before. That I used to pray Jason would mess up just once, so maybe Dad would look at me the way he looked at him. That I spent entire holidays pretending to be fine while choking down resentment like dry turkey. That I'd built my entire sense of worth around the idea that maybe one day they'd finally say they were proud of me. And when I said those things out loud, I started to see them for what they really were. Not truths, just wounds. I began to heal. Around this time, I also started changing my physical space. I'd lived in that apartment for nearly 5 years. It was comfortable, familiar, but it was also a reminder of the version of me who kept his head down and said yes too often. So I started making small changes. Got rid of the couch that sagged in the middle. Repainted the walls. Bought new curtains. Nothing flashy, but intentional. Then I took a bigger step. I found a condo. It wasn't massive, but it was mine. No shared walls. No leftover furniture. I used the savings I had left, plus a small bonus from a major project I'd completed at work, to cover the down payment. And when I signed the paperwork, standing in the quiet of that empty new space, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The kind that doesn't come from being praised or noticed, but from knowing, deep down, that you're okay without it. Work also began to feel different. I stopped volunteering for every after-hours project. I started drawing boundaries. And something surprising happened. My boss respected me more. I got offered a lead position on a cybersecurity initiative for a healthcare client, and when I crushed the rollout, it turned into a promotion. A real one. Title bump, salary increase, the works. And for the first time, I told people. I shared the news with friends. I let them celebrate me. I stopped pretending that downplaying my success was humble. It wasn't humility. It was fear of making others uncomfortable. And I was done shrinking to fit. I also reconnected with a friend from college, Leah. We'd been close back then, but lost touch after graduation. One day, she replied to an old Instagram story I'd posted of my condo renovation, and we started chatting. Slowly at first. Catching up. Remembering inside jokes. Then late-night texts turned into calls. Calls turned into dinners. Dinners turned into something more. She was different from anyone I'd dated before. She asked real questions. She listened. And she didn't try to fix anything. She just stood beside me as I figured it out. I told her everything. About Jason. About the mortgage. About the night I dropped the receipts. She didn't gasp. Didn't tell me I was overreacting. She said, "You did what you thought was right. That doesn't make you weak. That makes you strong. But letting go? That's the real power move." I think I fell for her a little right then. But even as things got better, there was still a part of me that felt unfinished. Like a thread had been pulled, but not cut. I didn't want revenge, not in the dramatic, TV show kind of way. But I did want clarity, accountability, truth. And then one day, it came to me. There was something my dad had said during that dinner, something I hadn't thought much about at the time. "You act like you've been carrying this whole family, but you wouldn't even be where you are if it weren't for this family." That line had stuck with me, needled at me, because in his mind, everything I had was owed to them. My education, my job, my life. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized what they really believed. That I was just a branch from their tree. That no matter what I did, I'd never be separate, never be equal, never be free. So I decided to show them otherwise. Not by yelling, not by arguing, but by building something so undeniable, so clear, that they couldn't twist it. A line in the sand. A final boundary. The clarity came in waves. Some mornings I woke up with a sense of purpose that buzzed beneath my skin like electricity. Other days, it was quieter, just a flicker of conviction reminding me that I wasn't the same man who'd walked out of that dinner, folder in hand. But as the weeks passed, something hardened inside me. It wasn't rage, not even bitterness. It was resolve. Because here's the thing, I didn't need revenge to feel better. I already felt better. I had a new place, a healthier mind, people in my corner who saw me for who I was. But what I didn't have, what I still craved, was accountability. Not just some forced apology or backhanded admission. I wanted them to feel it, to understand, on a cellular level, what they'd taken from me. And that meant I couldn't just move on. I had to move forward, with a plan. It started innocently enough. A question I asked Leah over dinner one night. If you wanted to send a message to someone without saying a word, something undeniable, but calm, how would you do it? She tilted her head, fork pausing midair. Depends on the person. But the best messages don't need volume. They just need timing. I nodded slowly, the idea already forming. Timing. I didn't want drama. I wanted precision. Something irrefutable. Something that forced reflection, not retaliation. So I began to build it. First, I pulled every piece of documentation I had. Emails, payment receipts, bank transfers, loan statements, refinancing notices, screenshots of every unauthorized transaction. I organized it all into a clean, chronological folder, each file named and labeled. It wasn't messy or emotional. It was just the truth, laid bare. Then I wrote a letter. Not a rant. Not a plea. Just a breakdown. Clear. Concise. Cold. It explained the total amount I'd paid over the last 3 years, down to the cent. It detailed the timeline of events, from the first call about the mortgage to the reactivation of my bank account without consent. It listed who was informed, when, and how. No blame. Just facts. At the end, I added a simple line. This document exists only for clarity. What you do with that clarity is up to you. And then I printed 3 copies. One for my father. One for my mother. One for Jason. I didn't mail them. Not yet. Because this wasn't about making noise. It was about choosing the perfect moment. That's when I remembered something. A few months back, before the dinner, Jason had been ranting on Facebook about how excited he was for our extended family's annual summer cookout. It was a big deal. Every year, my uncle hosted it at his lake house, and everyone showed up. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even distant relatives we only saw once a year. It was the kind of event where reputations mattered, where appearances were everything. I hadn't gone in years, mostly because I hated pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. But this year, I RSVP'd yes. And I brought Leah. We didn't tell anyone we were coming. We just showed up, casually, like we belonged there. Because we did. The lake house buzzed with chatter and barbecue smoke. People laughed over cornhole boards and passed around beers like currency. My cousin's kids ran around barefoot, chasing each other with water balloons. It looked like every other summer cookout, but I wasn't the same man standing on that lawn anymore. We hadn't even made it 10 steps into the backyard when I spotted Jason holding court near the grill, beer in hand, animatedly describing a recent huge deal he'd closed. My dad stood nearby, nodding with that familiar pride-drunk grin. My mom was laughing with a group of aunts, but her smile faltered when she saw me. Jason noticed a beat later. "Alex." His voice cracked through the hum of conversation. "Didn't think you were coming." I shrugged with a smile. Figured it was time. He looked at Leah, then back at me. "You brought someone?" "This is Leah," I said simply. "We've been seeing each other for a while." Leah smiled politely. "Hi. Heard a lot about this party." Jason's eyes narrowed, just slightly, but he recovered fast. "Welcome. Hope you like beer and ribs." I could have let it end there. I could have played along, pretended everything was fine. But this wasn't a social call. This was the setup. I waited until everyone had settled in, until the plates were full, the volume had softened, and the golden hour light made everything look warm and innocent. Then I made my way to the picnic table where Mom, Dad, and Jason sat, half listening to an aunt talk about her new kitchen remodel. I held 3 envelopes. Nothing dramatic. No red ink. No labels. Just plain, cream-colored envelopes, each one with a name written in blue ink across the front. I placed them down, one by one, in front of each of them. Jason raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "Something I should have shared a long time ago," I said. "Just some clarity." My dad narrowed his eyes. "More receipts." I met his gaze evenly. No yelling. No accusations. Just the truth. "In your own hands." My mom didn't touch hers. Neither did my dad. Jason opened his. Slowly. His eyes scanned the first few lines, then widened. He flipped a few pages, then looked up at me. "Is this all real?" "Every line," I said. "I've been collecting it for 3 years." In silence. My dad looked furious, but unsure of where to aim it. "Why now?" he asked. "Because I'm not going to carry this in secret anymore. I won't be painted as ungrateful or selfish. I've never asked for credit, but I will ask for truth." Leah joined me at the edge of the table, her presence a quiet anchor. "No one's forcing you to do anything with it," I added. "But I thought it was time you held it in your hands instead of ignoring it from a distance." I didn't linger. I walked away, but I didn't go far. From across the lawn, I watched as my dad finally opened his envelope, as my mom leaned in and started reading hers. Jason didn't say a word. He just kept flipping pages. The rest of the family had no clue what was happening. They laughed, poured drinks, passed coleslaw like it was just another sunny July afternoon. But at that table, something shifted. Later that night, when the crowd thinned and the fireworks were packed up, my dad approached me by the dock. His face was tight. Not angry, but something else. Something closer to shame. Or maybe confusion. "I didn't know it was that much," he said quietly. "I know. I thought you just helped once. Maybe twice." I didn't respond. After a moment, he said, "It wasn't right. The way we treated you. It wasn't an apology. Not really. But it was more than I ever expected. And it wasn't enough. Because what came next, what Jason did next, wasn't a quiet reflection. It was retaliation. And it nearly cost me everything I'd rebuilt." Jason always had this reflex. When he felt control slipping, he'd tighten his grip. But he didn't do it through anger or confrontation. He smiled. He charmed. He twisted. He'd rewrite reality in real time, convincing people they hadn't seen what they saw, hadn't heard what they heard. That skill had carried him through life, past every consequence. He was untouchable. At least, he thought so. After the cookout, I didn't hear much from anyone in my immediate family. For the first time in years, I felt peace. No texts. No financial emergencies. No guilt-soaked calls. Just silence. And I took that silence as a gift. I spent it with Leah, focused on work, and even took a weekend trip to the coast. No itinerary, just the sound of waves and no one expecting anything from me. I thought the worst was behind me. But 2 weeks later, it started. I got an email from HR at my company. A vague heads up that they had received an anonymous tip regarding possible ethical violations on a recent client security project. They wouldn't go into detail, just said they were obligated to conduct an internal review. I sat at my desk, my stomach hollowing out, rereading the message again and again. My mind spun. What violation? I'd done everything by the book. But then I remembered something. A conversation I'd had months earlier with Jason, back when we were still pretending to be brothers. He'd asked casually about a software deployment I was leading. Something about data encryption methods and client access portals. I'd answered vaguely at the time. Nothing confidential, nothing proprietary, but enough that someone could twist it just enough if they knew what to say. I was stunned. Could he have really? A day later, a LinkedIn connection request popped up on my phone from one of Jason's old real estate buddies. I recognized the name. They'd been at the cookout. I clicked on the profile and froze. The guy had recently taken a contract position as a business development consultant at my firm. Suddenly, it clicked. Jason hadn't gone after me through my family. He'd gone after me through my career. And now, I was under review because of it. I knew how these things went. My firm had to take it seriously, but they'd also see right through the claim once the audit wrapped. Still, even if I was cleared, a review like that stayed on your record. It raised eyebrows, created doubt, and in my field, trust was everything. I wasn't just mad. I was done. You don't attack someone's livelihood and expect a handshake afterward. Jason had played his hand. It was time for me to play mine. Revenge isn't about anger. It's about balance. And I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to text him at 2 a.m. in all caps or confront him in front of our parents. That wasn't my style. My style? Documentation, timing, and consequences. First, I pulled every bit of evidence I had. The HR review gave me a gift. It forced me to formally document what I already suspected. I submitted a detailed explanation of my conversation with Jason, the timeline of events, the name of his contact, and the nature of the suspicious allegations. I also referenced the family cookout, the only place where this conversation could have been overheard. I provided copies of the letter I'd given Jason, highlighting the financial data and how he might have used it to make the fake tip seem credible. Then I dug deeper. Jason liked to brag. He'd always been loose-lipped when it came to business wins. A few years back, during a Thanksgiving dinner, he'd gone on about a strategic short-term investment he'd made in a local property flip. He named the LLC, casually, like he was proud of it. I remembered it because it was the first time Dad had genuinely looked worried about how much money Jason had tied up in real estate. I searched public business records, found the LLC, found that Jason was still the registered agent, found that it hadn't filed taxes in over 2 years. From there, it didn't take much to uncover the rest. Zoning violations, unpaid contractor invoices, one pending lawsuit from a former tenant claiming unlawful eviction. I printed it all, found it, labeled it professional conduct concerns, and included a note. Should you ever consider Jason's professional advice or involvement, please review this dossier first. I sent one to our parents, one to his brokerage firm, and one, anonymously, to the state licensing board for real estate agents. But I wasn't finished. I remembered something else. Jason had borrowed money from Dad 2 years ago to flip another property. I knew it because Mom had mentioned it during a rare, wine-soaked phone call last Christmas. Apparently, Dad had taken out a personal line of credit and used the house as collateral. The house I'd been secretly paying for. So I checked. And sure enough, Dad's name was on the line of credit. And the house, my childhood home, was the asset backing it. But here's the thing, Jason never repaid it. So I filed a quiet lien through a third-party debt collector, citing undisclosed interest in repayment. I used the receipts I had, bank statements showing transfers to my parents during the exact time of Jason's project. I labeled them partial contributions toward debt tied to home equity. It wasn't airtight, but it was enough to trigger an investigation. And that was all I needed. Because the bank froze the credit line. The house, the one Jason had been hoping to inherit one day, was now considered a liability. And my father? He was furious. Not at Jason. Not at me. At the situation. Because for the first time, his sons weren't tools he could pit against each other. We were both problems. But only one of us had receipts. When the HR review ended, I was officially cleared. The fake tip was deemed baseless, and my record was sealed. I received a formal apology from my supervisor, and a quiet acknowledgement that this wasn't the first time they'd seen someone's past come back to haunt them. Jason never reached out directly, but I knew he felt the pressure. Word got around. His brokerage put him on probationary status, which was code for, "We're watching you." His next big real estate deal fell through after the lien made buyers nervous. And at the next family gathering, my cousin's wedding, he barely said a word to me. But that wasn't the win. The win came when my dad called me, late one night, sounding tired. Like something inside him had finally given up. "I read the file," he said. "The one about Jason. Is it true?" "Yes." Silence. I didn't know he'd gone that far. I waited. Then he said, "You've done well for yourself, Alex. Better than any of us gave you credit for. It wasn't love. It wasn't pride, but it was a sentence that, for once, didn't come with a comparison. I hung up the phone and walked to the window. Outside, the city lights blinked like static, cold and endless and honest. I felt Leah stir in the bedroom behind me, her presence steady, soft. I had no illusions that my family would ever change. Not completely, but I had changed. I had chosen myself, and I had finally been seen. For years, I tried to be the silent support beam in a house that never acknowledged my weight. Now, I'd built something of my own, not out of spite, out of freedom. And when they finally realized what they'd lost, when the house of cards collapsed without me, I wasn't there to catch it. Because I didn't know them that anymore. Not one more cent. Not one more second. Just this final line. They wanted me to measure up to my brother. Instead, I buried him, with nothing but the truth.